Alright, let me grab the chat and I'll just check on them real quick. It's all working. They all show up. Yes, they're good. Okay, so I want to look into a couple things today, and then maybe watch a couple videos, but we'll see how far we get. Let's jump into it. So the first thing I want to do a bit more of a deep dive into is the Alberta separatism movement. So 300,000 Albertans signed a petition to leave Canada. Is this confederation actually working for everyone? Okay. Whoever can. Give me as a challenge you'll face. Guy to give me challenges at this point. Having it essentially play devil's advocate is quite useful. This is just political theater. There's no real appetite for separation. The Forever Canada petition got more signatures, and nobody talks about that. So the Forever Canada petition was a very similar petition to the separatist one, but it was for staying a part of Canada. I think it got like 400,000 signatures. Separation one got 300,000. So there's actually a lot more. There's a lot more momentum and support for the Forever Canadian petition, but you don't hear much about it compared to the separatism movement. So we're gonna have a look at this. Partly true, which means we validate it and then pivot to why it doesn't win the argument. Okay. Let's get the facts. The Forever Canadian petition, certified by Elections Alberta in December 2025, collected 404,293 verified signatures, representing 13.6% of Albertans' electors. I guess that makes sense. Population. Okay. That is more than the 301,000 submitted by Stay Free Alberta this week. Okay, yeah. This is the two petitions operate under completely different rules. And let's see. Oh, yeah. Luke has filled the Forever Canadian petition under an older, stricter set of rules, which required collecting a staggering 293,000 physical signatures. So the actual Forever Canadian petition passed as a petition under a much stricter rule set that has recently been made significantly lighter or easier to fulfill. Nearly double the threshold Stay Free Alberta has to meet, even though they did get over that number. Since then, the Alberta government amended the Citizen Initiative Act. Oh yeah, here it is. Lowering the signature requirement and giving petitioners more time to collect them. The government changed the rules to make it easier for separatists to succeed, and harder to use the pro-Canada precedent as a benchmark. That's a deliberate political choice. So let me just see. The Forever Canada petition had a higher benchmark, and it passed that. They lowered the benchmark for the separatist petition, and so that also passed. Although it did have the required Stay Free Alberta this week, it did have the required signature, the old one. The Forever Canadian petition won, and then the government essentially shelved it. 5 months after the Forever Canadian petition was verified, the organizer accused the UCP government of dragging its feet and delaying the democratic process. Opposition critics say the Liberals were being sidelined to allow the separatist petition time to get its question on the referendum ballot. They delay whenever it's a voice that they don't want to listen to, said one NDP member of parliament, member of legislative assembly. Okay. Lucas himself said, for lack of a better term, the process is a sham. He accused Premier Smith, UCP, of playing a cynical political game. So the counter argument here challenge. Yes, more people signed the pro-Canada petition, and the government responded to. In response was to slow walk it while fast tracking the separation question. That's the story. So they're delaying the pro-Canada petition. Like, does that mean if the separatist question, essentially, if they get a petition, okay, so land the real point. The Forever Canadian petition proves your argument, not theirs. I mean, I don't know how I have a set argument, actually. I don't know what this thinks my set argument is. If 2/3 of Albertans want to stay in Canada, and those voices are being procedurally sidelined by the governing party, then this isn't really about what Albertans want. It's about what Danielle Smith and her political coalition want. It's a very different story and a more alarming one. Okay. Before we continue, I just gotta... If a petition is passed in Alberta, what happens? Do they get a vote on something? I assume, like, you pass the petition, you get a referendum vote. That's what it's called. So, what does that look like? I'll go back up and I'll get to the... That a double question. Ooh. Perfect. Oh, it's on thinking mode. We'll continue while it does that. Why it matters right now, the full context. Okay. The grievances are real, but widely misunderstood. Most Canadians outside Alberta have Carcantium?
Caricature.
Caricature. That means a light understanding. character. Okay, clearly that's not the way they're using it. Or performance that intentionally exaggerates, distorts, or simplifies the key features of a person or thing to create a humorous satire or insulting effect. Second one. Caricature. Most Canadians outside of Alberta have a caricature of the movement. Angry oil workers waving Wexit flags. Reality is more substantive. The core grievance is fiscal and economic. Over 20 years from 2000 to 2019, Alberta sent a net 324 billion more to Ottawa than was set back in Alberta. Whoa. So this is a net. So they've sent more. Isn't like the deficit spending in Canada like 50 or 60 billion usually? And that's as a whole country. And Alberta has sent 324 billion more to Ottawa than was sent back to Alberta. Roughly 78,000 per person, or 319,000 per family of 4. Oh, hey, that's a lot of money. This is over the 20-year period. Still, like you can buy a house. I mean, not in one of the big cities, but outside of them, in smaller communities with that amount of money. Now, the important nuance: Alberta doesn't technically pay into equalization. No province does. It's a federal program funded by federal tax is collected at the same rate across the country. The issue is that Albertans, being wealthier on average, pay more in federal taxes and get proportionally less federal spending back. But the emotional math is simple. Albertans feel like they've been bankrolling the country for decades while having their primary industry, oil and gas, blocked, regulated, and demonized by the same federal government they fund. Like that's been a big issue. From my understanding, Carney, the current Liberal leader, is far more permissive of oil and other kinds of energy. But the past, like under Trudeau, there was a big push for like save the environment kind of stuff, and it really prevented any kind of expansion into oil and gas, and you couldn't get a pipeline built, which is how you export oil and gas. They're kind of necessary, and this is something that has provided 324 billion more to Ottawa, and they were largely preventing expansion at all into this area. Yeah, okay. I should continue reading before I go on talking. Add pipeline cancellations, Northern Gateway, Energy East, carbon pricing, emissions, emission caps, and a federal government that has been liberal for most of the last 30 years. You have a genuine structural political governance, structural political grievance, not just noise. So I think they are, like, again, wasn't there a pipeline just recently announced to the US? I think I'm gonna need to open another one to ask. I want to already got too many things. But didn't Trump just sign pipeline? No, like the US, there's multiple layers to their system, and I think it passed like the first layer. Has there recently been a pipeline deal between Alberta and the US? Where does that stand? What do I need to get down here? Great question. Okay, so if a petition passes, what happens? This is where it gets genuinely fascinating because there are actually two separate referendum tracks running simultaneously in Alberta right now. Let me break down the whole thing down step by step so you can explain it clearly. Perfect. What happens after an Alberta petition passes? The complete breakdown. The two tracks running right now. Before the process, you need to understand there are two different referendum situations happening at once, and most people are conflating them. Track 1, Smith's government referendum. Who initiated it? Premier Danielle Smith. What's on it? 9 questions on immigration and constitutional reform. I think I've gone through the more on here. Date confirmed, October 19th, 2026. Status already happening. Is it binding partially? Track 2, Stay Free Alberta petition. Okay. Citizen via Stay Free Alberta. On it, 1 question about Alberta independence. Date confirmed, not confirmed yet. Legally blocked. Ooh, this is the thing they're talking about. Like the Stay Free Alberta being blocked. Status stuck in court. Is it binding? Would not be legally binding either. I mean, like these are referendum questions, right? You're just getting a documented note on how the people in the province feel on a subject. It's not specifically legally binding in quite the way that Brexit seemed to be, right? Like they voted yes on Brexit by slim majority and then they pushed through with it. That wouldn't happen in this case, but getting documented note on exactly where the people stand, that's just it's good for pushing forward like the Stay Free Alberta or the separatist, if you think that's the way it'll go. Track 1, how the referendum process works. What's already happening? Step 1, the government decides to hold one. Smith announced the October 19th referendum in a televised address on February 19th, 2026. She said she wants Albertans to vote on 9 questions based on what the Alberta Next panel heard from Albertans during town halls and written submissions. The questions cover immigration reform and constitutional changes. This track didn't need a petition at all. The Alberta government can call a referendum whenever it wants. Okay, this is the one we're more interested in. Step 2. Orders in council set the question and whether they're binding. No, okay. So this is still a part of the first one. Here's a part almost nobody covers. The government decide in advance which results it would have to legally honor. The Referendum Act allows Cabinet to put questions to Albertans in 2 forms: constitutional questions and non-constitutional. Cabinet also decides before the vote whether results will be legally binding, and that decision was made March 31st, 2026, before the campaign even began. Here's how it breaks down. The 4 constitutional questions, legally binding on Alberta's government if passed. Abolish the federal Senate. Requires unanimous consent of all provinces plus Parliament to actually happen. The Senate in Canada serves very, very little purpose. Like, I'm sure some people can create a reason for it to exist, but there's nothing that the House couldn't do. Anything that the Senate provides, the House could just do. Pretty much already does. So I've never really understood the need for it. It was, we copied the system from Great Britain or the UK, and the Senate was where they had like the Lords still got to sit, and we copied that for some reason, and then we like used part from the US to like fill it, like copy that their Senate to fill it. And I mean, I don't like the US Senate either. I don't think that's a good system. But anyway, give provinces power to appoint their own King's Bench and appeal court judges. Like, I think I've looked into this one a little bit. For judges, there's good reason to give power to provinces, and then there's good reason not to give power to the province, and to try and get them as unpolitical as possible. I'm not gonna decide any of the act, because these are the questions that are showing up, and these are the legally binding ones. I didn't know the other ones weren't. Allow provinces to opt out of federal programs in healthcare, education, social services, and keep the federal funding. So the provinces will get control over the healthcare, education, and social. How funding is allocated. I don't know, like, what does the federal system provide? I couldn't make a decision on that until I look more. Give provincial laws priority over conflicting federal laws in areas of shared jurisdiction. I mean, if it's shared jurisdiction, then people more on the ground in the provincial, that's probably better. But I'd have to look at some. The 5 immigration/policy questions explicitly declared non-binding. Questions on immigration control, restricting social services to non-permanent residents, requiring 12 months. Okay. Even if Albertans vote yes on every immigration question, the government has no legal obligation to act on any of them. This is a huge deal that most people don't know. Smith's government gets to campaign for yes on all 9 questions using public money. So they're campaigning yes on all 9 questions. So they want the government, or Smith's government wants yes the whole way down. And they've designed the questions such that, like, yes, like, they could just tell people vote yes on all of them. Okay. Smith's government gets to campaign for yes on all 9 questions using public money, then is only actually obligated to follow through on 4 of them, and even those 4 require the government to cooperate to implement. Step 3, the vote happens October 19th. Elections Alberta confirms a referendum is set for October 19th. Each referendum question will be on a separate ballot. Results from the unofficial ballot count must be completed in specific timelines, 12 hours after close of voting if there are 1 or 2 questions, scaling up to 36 hours for 4, 5, or 6. With 9 questions, this will take the longest timeline. Every eligible Albertan voter gets 9 separate ballots. Yes or no on each question individually. Oh, that just sounds like a pain. You telling me I'm gonna have to deal with 9 different pieces of paper? Why can't they just be in a list? What happens after a yes? For the binding constitutional questions, a yes result legally obligates Alberta's governments to take steps within its own jurisdiction, passing legislation, motions, writing to the other premiers, and launching court challenges. But here's the catch: none of the constitutional changes can actually happen without Ottawa or other provinces. Yeah, like even the legally binding ones that we were reading up here, like you don't just get to decide this. This is just showing that there's the will of the people is to get this, and so they're going to attempt to do this. And then if, for example, they get the yes vote for provinces to appoint their own King's Bench and Appeals Court judges, they can then go to Ottawa and be like, are you going to disagree with the people? Or can we appoint our own King's Bench and Appeals Court judges? So it gives them support of the populace in order to try and create the reform. Okay, where was I? None of the constitutional changes can actually happen without Ottawa and other provinces agreeing. Abolish the sentence, require unanimous consent for every province plus parliament. It's useless, but I don't see it getting unanimous consent. Someone's gonna disagree. Provincial appointments of judges requires a 7-5 rule. 7 provinces representing 50% of Canada's population. So a yes result obligates Smith to try. It doesn't obligate Ottawa to say. The non-binding questions, nothing legally happens. The government treats it as public opinion polling on expensive ballots. Okay, this is the one we're more interested in. And citizen initiative, the citizen initiative petition, the separatist question. This is the one everyone is watching. Here's how this entire separation process works. Okay, this is what I want to know. Step 1, petition is submitted. Stay Free Alberta submitted 301,620 signatures to Elections Alberta on May 4th, 2026. So, Stay Free Alberta. This one I gotta go up here for a second. I gotta find out the name of the other one again. Forever Canada was the stay petition, stay a part of Canada. They got like 400,000 signatures. Stay Free Alberta was the petition that was for separation. Stay Free Alberta. Then why not separate Alberta? That's going to confuse me. Yeah, the proposed question is, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada, become an independent state? Very clear question. Do you agree with that? I personally do not, but I don't mind using the pressure to try and reduce that equalization system. Highly disadvantages. Step 2, verification. Currently blocked by court. Petition verification is on hold pending an Alberta Court of King's Bench decision. Once the justice permits, Election Albertas will have 21 days to verify the petition using a method designed to achieve a 95% confidence. Verification also now includes a new wrinkle. the chief electoral officer directed that the verification process be amended to check if any seated names from the leaked Republican Party of Alberta voter list are contained in the petition. Ooh, I remember hearing about that. A lot of voter information for Albertan voters was released, and so now they're worried that someone could just copy that information and be like, "Look, they signed." They're just taking their informations. I mean, that makes sense. A mechanism designed to detect if the stolen voter data was used improperly to collect signatures. That's gonna be so hard to do. I mean, how do you even do that? Make Republican Party of Alberta. Okay. If verified, referred to Justice Minister. For a successful constitutional referendum petition, Elections Alberta submits a copy of the proposal to the Minister of Justice and Societor General. It then goes to the Premier to decide whether to schedule a referendum. So why did the one for staying in camp, why did that one not go to this step? Why is that one being held? Because that petition passed. That's the stricter referendum laws than stay free Alberta. Where is it? Forever Canada petition. Stay free Alberta. I cannot get these up. Stay free Alberta. Let me write these down. So the Forever Canada one passed, held up, and the Stay Free is currently also passed, but is held up because of this. Seated names from a leaked Republican Party of Alberta voter list are contained in the petition. So the chief electoral officer directed that the verification process must be amended to check if any seated names from the leaked Republican Party of Alberta voter lists are contained in the petition. A mechanism designed to detect if the stolen voter data was used improperly to collect signatures. So that where the Stay Free Alberta petition is stuck. Okay, step 3. If verified, refer to Justice Minister for successful constitutional referendum petition. Elect Alberta submit a copy of the proposal to the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. Then it goes to the Premier to decide whether to schedule a referendum. Again, like, there's technically nothing legally binding about a referendum. It's just getting like an official vote from the citizens of the province on the topic and where the people stand. Step 4. Premier calls the referendum if she wants to. Political scientist Laurie Williams says a referendum on independence is increasingly likely to go forward even if courts order the petition unconstitutional, because the separatist group has indicated that the Premier has power under the Referendum Act to call one anyways, and there will be pretty intense pressure on her to do so. In other words, Smith could add the independence question to the October 19th ballot, regardless of what happens in court with the petition. Using her own executive power under the Referendum Act, she has said she's open to it but won't commit. Albertans vote on should Alberta leave Canada? If the independence question makes it to the ballot, Albertans vote yes or no. But here's the critical legal reality most coverage misses. What a yes vote on independence actually means legally. This is the most important part for your stream. Because the separatists and the media often make it sound like a yes vote equals independence, it doesn't. I mean, it certainly doesn't. The legal system for separation, like, next to impossible. Like, whether you want to separate from Canada or not, the actual system of doing it is basically impossible. Like, you need to go through what, like the 750 rule or something, if you want to try and separate. Like, okay, let's just continue reading. Clarity Act, the federal gatekeeper. The Federal Clarity Act of 2000 outlines the process that applies in the case of a successful provincial separation referendum. A province does not have the authority to unilaterally secede from Canada. Any referendum question on secession must be clear, unambiguous. I think the question we read up earlier was very clear and unambiguous. And the vote requires a clear majority, not just 50% plus one, for the federal government to enter negotiations. What's a clear majority? Like, is that a super majority? Do they need like 60%? Oh gosh, that's what that either. Clear majority. Let's just see if it gets me a quick question. Oh, I have thinking on it. Okay, we'll come back to that. As I ignore the last thing that I clearly said I'd come back to. Under the Clarity Act, the House of Commons determines whether the referendum question was sufficiently clear and whether the majority was sufficiently clear to justify negotiations. The court did not create a right to unilaterally succeed. It created a conditional duty to negotiate. What is a clear majority? Okay, that's not gonna. That one got distracted. So it's more than 50%. This says it's not just 50%. So, like, what percentage of the vote do you need? So it comes up a clear majority. Is significantly more than half the votes members or people. 50. It typically represents a 50 plus 1 scenario or higher, ensure your winner. A party in power holds more seats in parliament. Okay, so it's not a clear majority. Doesn't seem to have a more than 50 plus 1. Not really helpful. Okay, translation. Even if 60% of Albertans voted yes, the federal parliament could look at the question, decide it wasn't clear enough, or the majority wasn't big enough and refused to negotiate. Carney's liberal majority government would almost certainly take that position. I mean, that would look really bad for them. If 60% of Albertans signed a petition for separation, I don't think that'll happen. But if they did, and then his government decides, oh, we're just going to ignore it, then that looks horrible on the liberal government. The Indigenous Rights Wall. Legal scholars argue that Indigenous people must be a part of any negotiation, and succession is simply impermissible where they do not consent, at least with existing borders intact. Yes vote in a referendum by itself has no other legal effect in basic international law terms. Three major First Nations group: Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, Blackfoot Confederacy, Athabasca Chippewan. Okay. Are already in court blocking the petition. So there's another legal hurdle here that the petition has to go through. And even if it like gets through, even if they hold this up in court like this, the premier can still just put it on the ballot because she has the right to put these questions on. I don't understand, because the name right, the Forever Canada petition passed as well, and that's also being held. But I guess it, like, if you put either question on, you're getting the consensus of the people of where they stand. Like, do you want to stay a part of Canada? Well, the people that don't vote yes are the ones that are part of the separatists. Do you want to separate from Canada? The people that, like, you still get both sides no matter how you ask the question. I'm wondering why they didn't put the first question. Like, it got more support. The negotiation would take years. Even in an optimistic scenario for separatists, path runs from referendum, federal act review, multiple negotiations, treaty consultation, blah, 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 blah. Each stage carries direct cost, years of process, but the bill arrives on day one. So, I mean, if this takes years, then you look at how let me see if I can find Quebec's opinion on separation over time. If I can get this image, because I've seen this one before. Like, it varies wildly. And usually there's only small moments where you can get a separation vote through. And then it's like back to being, oh, more people want to stay than separate now. And then what, do you just stop the process when it swings that back that way? I don't know where I saw that chart, but I'm not going to. Full picture and diagram. Alberta can hold a referendum. Albertans can vote yes, and none of that actually makes Alberta independent. What it does is create the most politically explosive leverage Alberta has had in 100 years. And Danielle Smith is using that leverage very carefully because she knows the moment the pressure disappears, so does her political power. I mean, that about sums it all up right there. It's a leverage for political power. That's what the separatist movement. I mean, if she uses that political power to get more resources for the province, because this whole thing stems from what, 320 something billion that Alberta has paid more to Ottawa than it's received in resources, essentially, like education and healthcare. That's a huge amount of money for 20 years. It came out to like what, $80,000 per person in Alberta. Crazy. Okay, I was looking at a pipeline here. Yes, there was a major development just last week on May 1st, 2026. U.S. President Donald Trump signed a presidential permit authorizing the Bridger pipeline expansion, a project often referred to in industrial circles as Keystone Light. Here is where the project stands and what the deal involves. Keystone Deal, Bridger pipeline expansion. The project is a joint venture between Calgary-based South Bow Corp and the US-based Bridger Pipeline LLC. It is designed as a more politically and environmentally efficient version of the cancelled Keystone XL. The expansion starts at the US-Canadian border in Phillips County, Montana, and runs approximately 1,050 kilometers south to Burnsley, Wyoming. I don't need to go. Current status. While the present permit is a massive hurdle cleared, the project is not yet shovels in the ground. Permitted, the federal cross-border permit is secured, but the project still requires state-level environmental reviews in Montana and Wyoming, as well as permits from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for waterway crossings. Construction is currently targeted to begin in 2027, with the first oil expected to flow by late 2029. So I like how you look at Trump and you look at Carney, like, oh, they're still in like a trade war, and then you look at the corporations and they're like, well, we're building a pipeline, get more oil down there. Like, things are still going here. Avoids reservations. The route does not cross any Native American reservation. Well, I mean, they're moving forward with pipeline expansion. It's something that was continuously stopped in the last government, so seems to be working in the right way. It looks like this whole separatism movement thing is a move for Danielle Smith to get political power. I mean, if she uses the political power to help Alberta and to get like more oil infrastructure, more pipelines and stuff through, I don't think a question will pass. I mean, you've seen it here. Forever Canada petition got more support than the Stay Free Alberta petition. But if the question shows up, like, that'll be interesting. I'll talk about it. When we get closer, I'll probably go through the 9 questions again. I think I did a short review on them in a previous stream. Ooh, here's a good one. Facts. See this. Stay Free Alberta. That's the separatist one. 301,000. Forever Canada. Stay a part of Canada. 404,000. And these had stricter requirements too. Needed a specific number of physical signatures, from my understanding of it. Albertans who'd vote to separate in a referendum. I mean, that's low. 27%. That's quite low. Committed. Cost acknowledged separatist 15 to 16%. Cost acknowledged. They understand all the cost. I mean, even if a referendum votes, as we've learned, it doesn't technically lead to anything. UCP supporters who'd vote for separation. 57%. Hey, voters who'd leave Alberta if it's separated. Oh. Voters who leave Alberta if it's separated. Oh. That seems a little crazy. Calgary Chambers of Commerce members worried separation raises recession risk. Absolutely. Separation would raise a recession risk. Like, the entire economy that you've created with the founding of Alberta would change instantly. Like, the only thing where you'd have some relevance is the oil system, but like some stability, but everything else, like, based off current law set. Cost of separation, 3,900. Lost next. Like, it doesn't sound like a good idea. It sounds like a useful tool that the premier is using to try and leverage her position to get more funding, essentially. Because this all comes down. The money. 324 billion more to Ottawa sent back in Alberta. 79,000 per person over the past 20 years. That's what it all comes down to. And I assume she's attempting to use this leverage to try and scrape some of that money back. Which, I mean, like, I agree with. Go for it. I certainly wouldn't vote as an Albertan to leave. But if you get the question on the referendum, get to show like, oh, this many people want to leave because of this economic situation. How do we resolve the economics? That gives you power going to Ottawa, which is a lot of what the referendum is. Did I ever get through this part? I think I got distracted out. See. Numbers are more complicated than either side admits. Here's what makes this a great stream topic. The The data is genuinely nuanced. CBC News random survey of 1,200 Albertans in April 2026 found 27% would vote for separation. That's pretty recent. While 67 would vote against. Support has held essentially flat for over a year despite months of high-profile campaigning. But here's the layer most people missed. In most polling, people who want to leave no matter what makes up only around 8 to 10% of Albertans. So basically, the number of 27 drops to 8 to 10 as soon as concessions are given, right? There's 27% of people who, okay, so there's 17% of people-ish who would vote separation just to get the advantage, just to get concession. The other 15 to 20% are what political scientists called symbolic or soft separatists. Maybe I'm wrong. Willing to vote yes in a referendum to send a message to Ottawa, not because they actually want independence. Okay, so pretty much what I was saying. And they want to send a message. They don't like how we're losing. I guess if that's all. 20 years, that's a lot. IPSOS stress test separation sentiment by introducing real world consequences, economic costs, loss of federal programs, uncertainty, actual commitment support for separation dropped to roughly 15 to 16% of Albertans when costs were made concrete. But what does the this is what you had to do for Brexit. Like, you had to make sure they understood the cause. And surprisingly, or not, the number goes way down once they understand the cause. But this is mostly the people that just want to send a message, right? So they're gonna say yes, I'll vote for separate. Send the message to Ottawa. It doesn't look like there's any chance of separation. It does look like we might get a referendum question on it, though, which will be very interesting. What does the petition actually represent? Likely a mix of true believers, protest votes, and people who are furious about the cost of living and want Ottawa to feel it. Pretty much. Part that makes it dangerous. Ooh, okay. Danielle Smith's political trap. Premier Smith has consistently said she supports a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. That sounds an awful lot like how Quebec talks. They like to talk like they're a country within a country. Okay. Polling shows 57% of UCP supporters would vote for separation, meaning Smith's own base is well ahead of her on this issue. Political scientist put it plainly. What the separatists don't want is Danielle Smith to campaign against separatism. They would rather have her keep her mouth shut. So her political party, UCP, what are the political parties in Alberta and what percentage of support do they have? Polling shows 57%, so if her party would vote for separation. And they're worried that she would campaign against separatism. I just want her to keep her mouth shut. UCP. Right? UCP. United Conservative Party. Danielle Smith. So she's currently got... Okay, so she's got about 50% of the support. Half of her members want to separate, so that's 25%. And the part of the population that says they'd vote yes, 27. So the entire separatist movement is under United Conservative Party. And even then, a lot of them are send a message, yes voters. Look at how just like the liberals are. The New Democratic Party is the second one here in Alberta. This is the political trap. Smith can't enthusiastically oppose separation without losing her base. She can't enthusiastically support it without a constitutional crisis. So she walks a tightrope, calling a referendum, letting the process pay out, hoping the no side wins without her having to say so. This is a deeply unstable political position, and it's happening right now. So she doesn't want this at all. Like, my thought was she was using this separatist movement to try and pressure Ottawa into being able to keep more oil money, essentially. Turns out she's in a political crisis and she just wants nothing to do with it. just let the no vote win. Don't. Maybe this is why the Forever Canada petition also got held up, because the Forever Canada one is to stay a part of Canada, but if you put that on there, you indirectly, through a no vote, are doing a separatist petition, right? So she can't have either of them. She doesn't want either of them to get out there. That's a shitty position to be in. This is a deeply unstable political position. Indigenous right could be the deciding factor. This is the most underreported dimension of the whole story. They're currently holding it up in court. A group of Alberta First Nations launched a court challenge arguing the separatist petition violates treaty right. As an Edmonton judge ordered a pause on the signature validation process until the courts ruled. This matters enormously. Treaties between First Nations and the Crown of Canada are federal agreements. Alberta, as a provincial government, cannot unilaterally exit those obligations. Any legitimate... Yeah, and like... The First Nations, their territories, they don't like align with the provincial borders, right? You see the what are they, the Kurds in the Middle East, that where they occupy covers like 4 or 5 different countries. The First Nations territories in Canada kind of do the same thing. So if Alberta wants to separate, you could cut their territory in half. That's not going to happen, right? So I assume that's why they're going to the courts with it. Honestly, maybe this doesn't become a vote. I don't know. If it does become a vote, I expect it to lose. But continue. Alberta, as a province, cannot unilaterally exit those. 1998 Supreme Court decision confirmed that a province cannot unilaterally secede, but have to negotiate its departure with the rest of Canada. Translation: even a referendum passed, Alberta couldn't just leave. The legal and constitutional path to actual independence is so complicated as to be nearly impossible in any near-term scenario. Ooh. This is interesting. The U.S. dimension. The wildest card. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Benson has publicly suggested the U.S. would work with a separated Alberta, saying he thinks we should let them come down into the U.S. Most Albertans, 73 to 77%, believe the U.S. would use political or economic pressure to compel Alberta to join if it succeeds. I mean, I'm part of that statistic. The Alberta Prosperity Project met with the U.S. State Department and Treasury 3 times between April 2025 and January 2026, suggesting the movement has gone beyond symbolism and is exploring realistic independent deals with the U.S. This is the dimension that most Canadians haven't fully processed. Alberta separatism isn't just about leaving Canada or a significant faction. It's about joining or aligning with the United States. In the current geopolitical moment, with Trump actively musing about annexing Canada, that is no longer a theoretical concern. Yeah, that's a dimension I haven't thought about a whole lot. Like U.S. pressure. How does that change things? So the premier is in a political situation and kind of just wants this to go away. If it doesn't go away and she's pressured by her base, we might end up with the separatist question on the referendum, with the other question in October. If the yes wins, which I do not expect to happen, there could be U.S. pressure for the secession, which would be that would be a okay. Let's summarize it in one line. Alberta separatism isn't really about leaving Canada. It's about forcing Canada to take Alberta seriously. The problem is that once you start the game, you can't always control where it ends. I think that's a good way to end it. All right, let's see. What was the other one I wanted to talk about today? My conversations go so long. The Supreme Court versus the Voting Rights Act. I have not heard about that. Okay, but I'll get into that after I go to the washroom. But this. Okay, I'll be back in a couple of minutes. All right. I guess I don't really need the headset on. I'm just listening to music. You can see my music playing over here. I know it's still going. But I also kind of like the music. Background noise is nice. Yeah, okay, we keep it. All right. Green. Everything's still working. All right, the next one we're going to look at, Supreme Court versus the Voting Rights Act. If the Supreme Court can quietly undo 60 years of civil rights protection, is American democracy actually being governed or just managed? Okay. Let's see. This topic has explosive debate potential. What actually happened? Supreme Court versus the voting right now. What? Go into details. I assume this is something that's happened rather new. Two L new chat. Great, right, code and canvas. Okay, we'll give it a second. Okay, this looks perfect. The relationship between the Supreme Court and the Voting Rights Act has reached a historic turning point. Just a few days ago, April 29, 2026, the court issued a landmark ruling in Louisiana versus Callis that many legal experts are calling the final blow to the Voting Rights Act as we know it. To understand the details, it helps to look at how the court has systematically dismantled the law into the law's two main pillars over the last decade. Okay. As a non-American, I don't know what the Voting Rights Act is. Let's just get a description. Voting Right Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a landmark U.S. federal statute that prohibits racial discrimination in voting. It was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. Okay, so prohibits racial discrimination in voting. How do you do that? How does that work? Like, isn't there, if you make a law that's like, oh, you can't use race, and can't they just make up another reason to gerrymander or whatever? Like, it doesn't seem to have stopped the gerrymandering problem in the US because I keep hearing about that. Alright, let's just read up on what's happening. This case centered on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits voting practices that discriminate based on race. Okay. The conflict. After a previous court order required Louisiana to create a second majority black congressional district to comply with the Voting Rights Act, the state did so. The SB8 map. However, a group of voters challenged this new map, calling it an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. The decision in a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court struck down the map. Justice Samuel Atto, writing for the majority, argued that the state used race too predominantly in drawing the line. So they were required to create a second majority black congressional district to comply with the Voting Rights Act. The new map they created, the state did so. The new map they created was struck down, argued that the state used race too predominantly in drawing the lines. But wasn't that the idea? They needed us to create a second majority black congressional district. How do you do that without using race to draw lines? Like, am I missing something? So, the new map was struck down because they complied with a previous court order for the Voting Rights Act. Okay. The intent shift. Crucially, the court updated the standard for Section 2. It held that to prove a map is discriminatory, plaintiffs must now essentially show intentional discrimination rather than just proving the map results in less opportunity for minority voters. Court updated the standard for Section 2. It held that to prove that a map is discriminatory, the plaintiffs are the ones bringing forward the complaint, must now essentially show intentional discrimination rather than just proving the map results in less opportunity. So you can't just use the effect of the map. You have to be able to show intentional discrimination. Dissent. Justice Ellen King took the rare step of reading her dissent from the bench, stating that the court has eviscerated the law and created an almost insurmountable barrier for anyone trying to challenge discriminatory maps in the future. Oh. So the discriminatory map was challenged by a court. They changed it, and the change was shut down. Argued that the state used race too predominantly in drawing the line. How else do you create two majority black congressional districts without using race to draw the lines? Like, their argument on why they shut it down, I don't understand. Like, the Voting Rights Act prevents discrimination based on race, right? But you have to look at and draw based on race if you want to try and prevent the discrimination based on race. The very Voting Rights Act itself is basically stating that map can't be race blind. It should take into consideration race when drawing a map. They shut it down on the argument that it used race too predominantly in drawing the line. I mean, the effect of this is, as they say, anyone trying to challenge discriminatory maps in the future are going to have a much harder time. I just like that argument. That argument is weird. Let's continue. Let's see the full context. The context, decade of dismantling. This latest decision is the third and final act in a trilogy of cases that has redefined American voting law. Okay, 2013, Shelby County versus Holder. Struck down Section 4, effectively freezing Section 5. Not gonna go. They've been coming after this law for a long time by the looks. What happens now? The ripple effect of the Canis decision are already being felt across the U.S. as the 2026 midterm elections approach. Map redrawing. Several southern states, including Alabama and Tennessee, have already called special legislative sessions to redraw their maps. Republican lawmakers are citing this ruling as a green light to crack or pack minority districts to gain partisan advantage. So, from my understanding, what you're doing, and like, this is gerrymandering, right? What you're doing is you're trying to get as slim a majority as possible in as many different districts as possible, because that is what gets you the most wins, right? The most legislators. That's how you win the most districts. And then you pack all the people that aren't going to vote for you into a couple specific districts that they'll win. The issue that you run into with this is that, say you want to win a district just by a little bit, right? Like you want to win it with like 55% of the vote, and because you want to win the majority of the districts with that. If there is a large scale shift in voting, all the districts conflict, rather than having districts that are always going to be your way, because you've essentially made them all more competitive in order to get more of them. But this can turn on you. And if the Democrats see this and start targeting these districts with a closer, that have been historically red, but now have a closer majority, they're more competitive, the district is more competitive now, they might be able to flip some of them, and you could end up losing more districts in the end. I don't know. The whole gerrymandering thing is weird. We want to go to... Is there gerrymandering in Canada? Do we redraw district? Okay, short answer, not in the same way as the US, but the issue can appear in milder form. Why Canada mostly avoids gerrymandering? Canada is often cited as an example of how to prevent gerrymandering because 1. Independent commissions draw the maps. Federal electorate boundaries are drawn by nonpartisan, arm's-length commissions in each province. Politicians do not design or approve the map. This greatly reduces opportunities for partisan manipulation. 2. Public input plus transparent process. Commissions hold public hearings, publish draft maps, take feedback before finalizing boundaries. This makes hidden manipulation very difficult. 3. Rules limit political influence. Seat numbers and boundaries are guided by population counts from the census. Representation rules in the Electoral Boundaries Readjustment Act. Limits on population deviation. Parliament can object, but it cannot directly redraw the maps. So does gerrymandering ever happen? Not in the classic US sense. Extreme partisan map rigging. But two softer issues occur. Malaporto. Gosh. The heck. Luckily. When I don't know how to say it.
Malapportionment. Malapportionment.
Malapportionment. Okay. I get the malapportionment. Unequal population across ridings. Some ridings have fewer voters than others, especially in rural, northern, or protected provinces, like Prince Edward Island. This is not deliberate gerrymandering. It's built into the Canadian Constitution rules to protect regional representation. But the effect is similar. A voter in a small rural riding can have more weight than one in a larger urban riding. I mean, like if they've taken that into account, into constitutional rules, and that's part of the system. Subtle biases through commission decisions. Even independent commissions make judgment calls. Where to put boundaries, how to weight communities of interest, how much population deviation to allow. Sometimes parties gain or lose somewhat based on these choices. There is no evidence of systematic partisan. Bottom line, Canada is considered one of the least gerrymandered democracies because elected officials do not control a map drawing process. However, representation imbalances still exist, mainly due to population differences and neutral commission decisions, not deliberate partisan. Okay. I officially like our system because we don't have this problem at all. What happens now? The ripple effects of the Canis decisions are already being felt across the US. I get down to read that. Southern states have already called special to redraw their maps. Partisan shield. Court basically ruled that if a map looks like it discriminates against black voters, but the state claims that they were just trying to help their political party, partisan gerrymander, the map is likely legal. Congressional response. There are renewed calls from civil rights groups for Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would effectively reset the law to its original strength, though it faces a steep climb in a divided legislature. In short, the result test protected minority voters' voting power for 60 years has been replaced by a much stricter intent test, making the Voting Rights Act a significantly weaker tool than it was even a year ago. Basically, they're making this harder, where a court orders Louisiana to create a second majority black congressional district. They've made that harder to do by ruling against this one. And so now, rather than looking at the results, does this discriminate? You have to prove intent to discriminate. And proving intent is significantly more difficult. Because they can just say, I was doing this for my political party. rather than I was doing this to disenfranchise black vote. Well, that's a dangerous system. As I said, though, like, when you gerrymander, you are essentially making districts more competitive. And you make a district more competitive, it can flip. It is just easier to flip. So I'll be interested. Like, will the Democrats try to do that? Like, target some of these districts that now have a closer riding? This will make it interesting because there are places where the Democrats, they don't really focus on certain areas, because if the district's always being read by a large majority, then what's the point? You're not gonna even if you get some people in that district to swap, they're not gonna swap the district itself. But if you suddenly make that district more competitive, all of a sudden, like, maybe you see a push to try and get like Texan and Floridan people to vote Democrat, because it takes less of them to switch a district. And if you see something like that, like, you could see a big shift. I mean, I think this is going to make the midterms interesting. I still prefer the Canadian system, but I mean, it will be entertaining. When are the midterms in the US? Tuesday, November 3rd. So the midterms are early November. The Alberta referendum is late November. November is going to be a busy month. What is at stake? 2026 midterms are particularly significant as they occur during President Trump's second term. The entire balance of power in Washington is up for grabs. House of Representatives, all 435 seats are up for election. Currently, Republicans hold a slim majority, and Democrats only need to flip a few seats to take control. This is why they're gerrymandering so hard. Just a couple seats. That is the difference. U.S. Senate, 35 of the 100 seats are being contested. This includes 33 regular cycle seats and 2 special elections in Florida and Ohio to fill vacancies left by Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. Oh, so these guys were senators, and they left the Senate to become part of the administration. So now their seats need to be refilled, but they're probably pretty... I'd imagine those are pretty safe districts. Unless you've gerrymandered them and made them more competitive. Then who knows? Gubernational races. Gubernational. 39 states and territories will be electing governors. Redistricting impact, as mentioned before. The recent Supreme Court ruling in Louisiana, first callus, has triggered a late cycle scramble in several states to redraw congressional maps, which could significantly shift the math for which party wins the House. Interesting. It looks like they're just gonna let them run wild and gerrymander and see what happens. Which states are looking at changing their maps before the midterms? Unprecedented last minute scramble. Okay, Louisiana, the epicenter. Immediately following the ruling, Governor Jeff Landry took the extraordinary step of suspending the state's May 16 congressional primary, even though absentee voting had already begun. Wait, can you do that? Suspending the state's primary, even though voting had already begun. The goal: redraw the maps to eliminate the second majority black district that the Supreme Court just ruled was unconstitutionally racial gerrymandering. So what, they go back to a single black majority district now? Goal is to go back. I mean, like, if the Supreme Court was the one that decided it, I guess, like, isn't that what they have to do? You don't want to go against the Supreme Court. The impact: this move is intended to flip one Democratic seat back to Republican control before November. It has already sparked a wave of emergency lawsuits from voters who had already cast ballots. Of course. Doesn't? This is a primary. I don't understand the primary system. Like, this is choosing a party leader, right? Okay. Let's learn the other ones. Alabama seeking a reset. Alabama officials filed an emergency motion to lift a previous court order. Florida targeting the Fair Districts Amendment. Tennessee targeting the lone Democrat. What? Tennessee Governor Bill Lee and state leaderships are discussing redrawing lines to target the state's remaining Democrat held seat in Nashville. So the Democrats get exactly one seat in Tennessee, and they're like, no, you will get none. We will find a way to give you none. Other states to watch. While the South is primarily focusing it's probably focus of the redistricting war. The redistricting war has become a national tit for tat. South Carolina, California, Virginia. Oh, it's a mess. This mid-decade redistricting is highly unusual. Historically, courts have avoided changing district lines so close to an election. But the 2026 Supreme Court has signaled that these traditional expectations may no longer apply. I mean, just think, you could have it done by an independent commission that just sets it all up, and then your lawmakers, they don't get to change it or work it in any way. And then there's none of this. Like, there is a better system. There is. And it is being used in other places. I don't think it's good to give parties control. Like, there was a quote. Let me make sure I get this right. This isn't voters choosing who represents them. It's who represents them choosing their voters. And I don't think that's a good idea. But again, not my country. Let's move on. Okay, so those are the two big things out.
Malapportionment.
Never going to use that one. Never going to use this one. This one.
Caricature.
Caricature. Performance that intentionally exaggerates, distorts, or simplifies the key features of a person or thing to create a humorous, satirical, or insulting effect. Caricature. I like that one. Okay. Let's see. I wanted to look at continuing finding the best content to react to. Found a Canadian that I'm gonna look at here. Videos. Okay. I liked this one. Now let's see. 100K jobs companies can't fill, right? What the war in Iran means for Canada. That's the one I wanted.
Canada has
Here we go. What the war in Iran means for Canada.
changed this position
I make that change.
on the Iran war 4 times in 10 days. Day 1.
Canada supports the United States acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace.
Day 4.
These actions are inconsistent with international law.
Day 5.
One can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies.
Day
I mean, like that one just makes sense. Like, if Turkey, who's a part of NATO, ended up getting hit by rockets, I could very easily see Canada getting drawn into the war, because that would be a NATO response. And so, like, I don't think that's separate from what he was saying.
10.
Le Canada ne participe pas dans les opérations offensives des États-Unis.
Like, none of them are really a chain. Let's hear them all again from the beginning.
Canada has changed this position on the Iran war 4 times in 10 days. Day 1.
Canada supports the United States.
Like, supports the United States in preventing the Iran regime from getting a nuclear weapon. You can support them without participating in the war itself. Like, you can support their decision without participating.
Acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon
I agree.
and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace.
Day 4.
These actions are inconsistent with international law.
Like, I mean, like, some of the things Trump said, there was a lot of what was it? We will, like, remove the Iranian culture or something, like the Iranian society. Like, verbally, there was definitely some things that were not consistent with international law.
Day 5.
To be noted that they haven't done. Like, Trump talks a lot about breaking the international law, but he hasn't just targeted oil infrastructure or energy yet.
One can never categorically rule out participation.
Absolutely, we can't. Like, I mean, again, they strike NATO. NATO is a defensive alliance. We could be drawn into the war. Now, I haven't heard anything about them targeting. The only NATO country there is Turkey. That's kind of like in their range. And I think they shot down a couple rockets that were heading to Turkey, but I haven't heard about anything hitting Turkey itself.
We will stand by our allies.
Day 10.
Absolutely.
Le Canada ne participe pas dans les opérations offensives des États-Unis et Israël et ne y participe jamais.
I mean,
So-
like the never say never, right? Like you don't know how things are gonna change. I largely, I mean, honestly, like I kind of follow what he says. Like support the U.S. I don't see us getting drawn in unless NATO itself is attacked by Iran, and I think that their capacity to do that has largely been diminished. But I don't see how any of those are actually a change in position. Like if anything, I think we should be trying to help more. I mean, I don't exactly know what we could provide in this situation. Like we don't have military assets there. We're giving money to Ukraine. That's kind of the conflict we're focused on. What was it? Like another 250 million in aid was just confirmed for Ukraine.
Which is it? While the headlines focused on the contradictions, we wanted to figure out why this was so hard to answer. And as it turns out, Canada has a genuinely complicated relationship with this war. And it quietly connects to our gas bill, our mortgage rates, and our military credibility, not to mention a community of over 500,000 Canadians. And above all, what kind of country we actually want to be. So let's get into it.
This sounds interesting.
On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched joint military strikes on Iran. They targeted military infrastructure, air defense systems, and killed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
Oh,
with
so this isn't the 12-day war. The official start of open hostilities where they took out the Supreme
in the first
Leader.
24 hours.
And maybe the second Supreme Leader. I mean, have we still not seen anything from him? Like, they were saying he was severely injured last time I heard.
10 days later,
But they were saying he was fine first, and then he's like, oh no, he's not showing up because he's hurt. Well, like, if he's only talking to people through messages and letters, like, that's not proof of life.
the bombs were still falling, and Iran just named the Khamenei's son as the new Supreme Leader. Israel's military has publicly promised to eliminate him. Trump says that he won't last long without American approval. Iran's foreign minister has rejected any ceasefire. Iran's response has been
There's still... I hear reports that the Iranian regime has fractured. Can you give me more information about this? Why can they not send a negotiator? We gotta keep
to
watching.
wage a regional war, firing over 500 ballistic missiles and nearly 2,000 drones at Gulf states and US military bases, and targeting the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply moves every.
The fertilizer was another thing that I was going to talk about, because without making big headlines, the food system is slower because you plant, grow, and then harvest your crops, and eat your crops, storage of crops, and so it's a very slow system, and slowly it is coming under extreme strain because of this lack of fertilizer. Here in Canada, we don't see as much of it, from my understanding. But in places like India, this is going to be a huge problem, because this is 1/3 of global fertilizer, but it's the majority of the fertilizer they get that is being impacted. Here's a clear, fact-based picture of what fractured means in the context of Iran right now, and why that affects negotiations, and why Tehran hasn't simply sent a negotiator to conclude talks with Washington. Is the Iranian regime actually fractured? There are different interpretations of this claim. External narrative frame Iran's leadership as fractured or in collapse due to economic pressures, military setbacks, and internal disagreement. Some U.S. politicians and commentators argue elite divisions are so deep that negotiation positions aren't unified. Independent reports and analysts generally do not find evidence of a full collapse of control. They note that Tehran's leadership, while under strain, still maintains institutional authority and decision-making coherence. So they're saying that they still have decision-making coherence, the regime. Okay. Inside Iran's politics, there are real elite disputes and public disagreements. Example, between more pragmatic officials and hardliners tied to the Islamic Republican Guard Corps, IRGC. These tensions affect policy debates, including diplomacy. The bottom line, the regime isn't literally shattered. It is strained and showing public factionism, and contradictions, but it still retains central control, especially under hardline facts. What's behind this fragmentation? Several factors explain why Iran isn't speaking with one clear negotiating voice. Hardliners versus pragmatists. Iran political system includes multiple power centers. The hardliners include IRGC leaders want to resist concession and avoid appearing weak. More pragmatic politicians may see negotiations as a way to ease sanctions and economic pain. These groups often publicly contradict each other. Oh, so kind of like how you look at the U.S. House of Representatives, and you get different opinions from different sides. They're quite divided right now. Institutional shifts, but they do appear, from what I understand, to have decision-making coherence. Institutional shifts and power grabs. The IRGC and security elites have gained influence, particularly during wartime, reducing the authority of civilian diplomats. Delegation credibility. Reports from analysts note that even when Iran did send representatives, for example, the first rounds of talk in Islamabad, other elements within the regime did not back their positions, sometimes rejecting or overruling them afterwards. War dynamics and leverage. Iran may believe it holds strategic leverage, control over Strait of Hormuz, and doesn't need to rush into negotiations. Tehran official rhetoric often portrays negotiations as low priority or tactical, not existential. So, from my understanding, the U.S. believes the same thing, that their blockade is having significant effects, and that the time pressure is on Iran. And Iran seems to believe that they do not need to rush, and that blocking the Strait of Hormuz has put the time pressure on the U.S. And so I think we're in a situation where both sides are just happy to wait and play it out and see where the time pressure really is. So why has Iran not sent a negotiator or delivered a clear negotiating position? lack of unified authority, internal vetting and veto power, political signaling, domestic pressures. What this means for diplomacy: because of these internal dynamics, the regime message about negotiations are often inconsistent. Officials may attend primary talks or send drafts without a formal, empowered negotiating mandate. Hardliners may block or delay any official return to negotiations, concede leverage, or appeal weak. This is why Tehran has not simply sent a negotiator with clear authority or concluded a deal, even if some elements within the regime personally want to negotiate. Caveats and context. Fracture in media/political discourse is often rhetorical and strategic rather than a literal description of regime collapse. Iran still maintains functioning executive, military, and diplomatic institutions, even if they disagree. Public disagreements don't necessarily mean the regime will break apart. They can also be tools of internal bargaining or strategics. It's basically hardliners versus pragmatists, and we would prefer it if the pragmatists were the winners. Problem. Oh, yeah, I wanted to ask about. With so much of the world's fertilizer not coming to market through the Strait of Hormuz, how does this affect Canada? How much fertilizer does Canada get through the Strait of Hormuz? Now, I'm going to assume this is going to be little to none, but just like we get no oil through the Strait of Hormuz, I don't think any of that comes to Canada, or very little. The fact is, oil prices in Canada have gone way up because we purchase from a global market. Fertilizer is the same. We purchase fertilizer on a global market, even if the fertilizer that's being cut down on does not come to Canada. It then means places like India will be bidding to purchase the fertilizer that we do get. So the price of fertilizer will, and that means the price of food will go. And this isn't something you see now. This is something you see like 10 months to a year because of the growing delay that's in the system. All right, here's a clear Canada-focused picture on how the disruption of fertilizer flows through the Strait of Hormuz affects Canada agriculture and markets, and importantly, what portion of Canada's fertilizer actually comes through that route. Here we go. Why the Strait of Hormuz matters for fertilizer. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical maritime choke point linking the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Before recent disruption, a large share of global fertilizer exports, especially nitrogen-based fertilizers like urea and ammonia, originated in the Gulf region and transited the strait. Estimates suggest roughly 35 to 45% of global urea export and sizable shares of sulfur used in phosphates and ammonia trade normally move through Hormuz. Because many fertilizer plants depend, like, most people don't realize how dependent our agricultural system is on fertilizer for its output. Like, the reason there's so many people on planet Earth is because of how much output we're able to get off specific land. And fertilizer is a very important aspect. And having that be cut down by 30 to 45%, like, people will starve if this continues. Not now, but eventually. And that is something we should be trying to avoid. And I have no idea how to do that when both the US and Iran appear to be in a wait and see mentality. Okay, because many fertilizer plants depend on Gulf feedstocks and exports, blockages or risk-driven shutdowns in the Strait tighten global supply and push up prices. Even though this is not about Canada's direct shipping through Hormuz, global market prices and available supply are interconnected, so disruptions anywhere can affect Canada. Canada's fertilizer imports and how Hormuz disruptions affect them. Canada's fertilizer import picture. According to recent trades and industrial data, Canada imports roughly 4.1 million tons of fertilizer per year. These imports include... Okay, I'm not going to read them all, but I remember urea was one of the ones coming through the strait. Canada does not produce phosphate domestically, so virtually all phosphate fertilizer depends on imports. Phosphate, this one. And this is another one that a sizable share of sulfur used in phosphates that goes to the strait. While Canada produces nitrogen and potash domestically, market logistic means some nitrogen imports still flow from US ports and historically from the Middle East. That's the thing, right? With Canada being so large, with how cheap they've created shipping, sometimes it's just easier to put oil from the Middle East on a ship and bring it over than it is to try and ship oil from one side of the country to the other. Because, you know, shipping's cheap. They've been able to do that. Waterways, that's how we've traded for a long time. It's the cheap way of doing stuff. You see the size of those tankers, like. But the same thing goes with with fertilizer. Sometimes it's cheaper just to bring the fertilizer over from the Middle East than it is to try and ship it all the way across the country. So how much comes via the Strait of Hormuz? Canada doesn't typically import fertilizer directly from the Middle East via Hormuz. Canadian imports mainly land through US and Atlantic ports. Okay. So we get most of ours from the US and Atlantic ports. However, global fertilizer markets are tightly integrated, just like oil markets, right? When exports from the Gulf region are constrained because Hormuz traffic is restricted, global supply tightens and world prices rise, and that indirectly affects Canada's import cost and availability. So the answer is essentially, Canada itself doesn't literally have fertilizer ships coming in through the Strait of Hormuz, but global fertilizer flows that would have passed through the strait supply markets that Canada participates in, and therefore influences Canada's fertilizer price and availability. This is because fertilizer, especially nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers, are traded on global markets, and disruptions anywhere, including Hormuz, compress supply and push prices up that all importers, including Canada, must pay. So just like with oil, despite Canada not getting our fertilizer through the strait, we're seeing a 1/3 contraction in the amount of fertilizer produced globally, which is going to raise fertilizer. And I think it's probably going to rise a lot. Well, Fertilizer prices. Ooh, urea. This is the one we were looking at. Price chart. I like this trading economic. Hey, it plummeted. One year. Let's go 5 years. Whoa, what was happening back there? That is that. Yeah, that looks like COVID. It's madness. All of COVID. It's madness. And then they stabilize, and we've had an uptick. And we've actually had a down. What's my date? May 4th. Hey, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. This is a little old. Yeah. There's no way they just stayed stable. But the downward decrease? I mean, like, maybe there was good news. Someone should probably keep a track of that. That one, that could be scary. All right. Economic and agricultural impacts on Canada. Fertilizer prices have surged. Global nitrogen fertilizers have seen significant price increases due to the train flow and production shutdowns linked to Hormuz disruption. Canadian farmers face higher input costs, which means you will face higher food costs. Canada producers are reporting high fertilizer costs and tighter availability as a result. Rising input costs can increase overall food production costs and feed into consumer prices. Supply chain ripple effects. As fertilizer becomes more expensive and harder to secure, farmers may have to adjust planting decisions, crop mixes, or application rates, which can influence yields in the next growing season. Even if Canada doesn't directly rely on shipments to the Strait of Hormuz, global fertilizer markets are interlinked. A disruption at a major choke point affects prices and availability worldwide. If the strait remains constrained for weeks or months, the long-term effects can ripple into agricultural input markets well beyond the Middle East. Summary snapshot. How much fertilizer does Canada get through the Strait of Hormuz? None directly. How does the disruption matter to Canada? The global disruption of fertilizer supplies, especially when delivered from the Gulf regions, are limited by Hormuz traffic issues. Tightening global markets raises fertilizer prices and can reduce availability even for countries that don't import directly. Effect on Canada farmers: higher input cost, tighter supply of key fertilizers, potential influence on planting decisions. Okay, I think I've gotten way off topic. Let's get
every
back.
single day. Tanker traffic through the strait has collapsed. Bahrain has declared force majeure on its oil operations. Qatar, one of the world's largest LNG exporters, paused production. Oil, which was sitting at about $70 a barrel before this all started, briefly hit 100.
Have a look at our oil chart. Oh, we got a free. Not the music though. We still got music. Okay, here we go. Where is our oil price chart? Let's see how it's going. Last time I looked, it was like, oh, it's coming back down, and we're back up. I mean, it's hovering just above $100 a barrel. I mean, it's been worse over here. I mean, despite all this, Dow Jones Industrial Average. War's been going on for longer. War started, it went down. Then it rallied. Recently, it's come down a little bit. Long way from the over 50,000 damn Bondi. She made that claim and then it just kept going down. Somewhere in here she had to leave. It was getting back close again. Oh, 4.9. 4.952. I don't know. Like, it's weird. Markets, I don't want to begin to predict the markets because they don't do what I think they should do. Like, at no point has the oil supply returned. So my brain tells me this line should still just continue down. But then Trump started what was it? De-escalation. He was no longer actively bombing. And it was seen as a de-escalation spiral. And see the bounce back once de-escalation started. But nothing's been solved yet. And both sides appear to be in a wait it out mentality, thinking that the other side will hurt more if they drag this out. Okay, I have no idea if I'm gonna get this or not. We're 2 minutes in.
$120 this week. Asian stock markets are in free fall.
I will interrupt
The
less.
war has now pulled in Lebanon, Hezbollah.
Asian markets in free fall. Let me see that one. Okay, I don't know what any of these stand for.
The war has now pulled in Lebanon. Hezbollah has opened a second front against Israel, and Israel has launched a ground incursion in the south. 7 American soldiers are dead, and the conflict has now touched more than a dozen countries, including...
I like that. Yeah, the big one are the rockets going into Turkey. Those are the ones that might draw Canada. I don't know why launching rockets at Turkey. But then, why are they launching rockets at Saudi Arabia? Why are they launching rockets at Oman? You know, like they're not lost countries. But as far as I understand, a lot of these countries have kind of, they want to see an end to the regime now. From my understanding, the UAE allowed a lot of Iran banking to go through it to avoid US sanctions. And they've stopped. And they're now largely siding with the US and preventing Iran from avoiding the sanctions. And now with the blockade, can't get ships out on there. Like, if I have to say it, Iran is going to feel the pressure before the world market. It's not going to be pleasant for the world market for fertilizer and oil, but I think Iran will collapse because of the pressure long before it does serious damage to the world market. Which means Trump's just going to wait him out.
Putting Turkey, a NATO member. That's where we were on day 10. Now let's talk about what this means for us, Canadians. When it comes to Canada, we are structurally one of the most conflicted countries on Earth when it comes to Middle East. And that's not an exaggeration. It's a function of our geography, our economy, and the deep internal divisions that we've been patching over for 50 years. We produce massive amounts of oil. We also import massive amounts of oil. Those two facts produce completely opposite outcomes from the same crisis. And they map almost perfectly onto the Alberta versus everybody else fault line that defines Canadian politics.
The increase in the price of oil is an immediate boon to the province's finances. A $1 increase translates to roughly $750 million in royalty revenues.
If you live in Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Newfoundland, or you work in the energy sector anywhere in Canada, this war is, financially speaking, good news for you. Canada produces close to 5.5 barrels of oil per day. That makes us the fourth largest producer in the
In millions. Millions. In millions per day. The US produces the most. 22.8. Saudi Arabia, Russia, Canada, China. But remember, China's population's over a billion people. That's what, over 20x ours? And they produce less oil. Iran. Oh, Iran produces quite a lot. Saudi Arabia. United Arab Emirates. Iraq. Really? Like a lot, because this Iraq all goes through the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE, they have a pipeline that allows them to go around, but I don't think it allows the full capacity of oil to go around, and so they're constrained. Obviously, Iran is now under a blockade. China's producing, Canada's producing, Russia's competing. Saudi Arabia, the same issue where a lot of their oil went through the Strait of Hormuz. They also have a pipeline, but not that much of their capacity can be sent through it. And then the US, 2% of the world's oil production.
world behind the US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. In the last decade, our oil sands, which used to be considered expensive to run, have gotten dramatically more efficient. And Canada's 5 biggest producers can now break even and still pay their dividends at prices between $40 to $43 per barrel. And given that oil just hit nearly 120 this week, that can be an extraordinary margin. When global oil prices go up, every extra dollar per barrel flows almost directly into revenues of Canadian producers. And through royalties and corporate taxes, they go into provincial and federal government coffers. If prices hold anywhere near current levels, we're talking about transformational numbers for Alberta's budget, for Canada's LNG export case, and for the very nation-building projects that we've been talking about in our recent videos right here. Here where it gets complicated, and where it affects the rest of Canada very differently. Higher oil prices are also making everyone's life more expensive. Sure, Alberta gets to offset these costs with higher revenues, but other provinces, not so much. Quebec and Atlantic Canada sit in very different positions. Quebec is a partial exception. Its electricity grid runs almost entirely on hydropower, which means that Quebec residents' heating bills and power costs are largely shielded from this oil crisis. But Quebec's cars, trucks, and supply chains still run on oil. Its refineries import the majority of their crude through pipelines that transit the United States. This oil is priced off global benchmarks, and they have no control over it. And they have no royalty revenue coming back to offset the costs. Quebec grid is protected, but the gas stations aren't. Atlantic Canada is a slightly different story. The Irving Oil Refinery in St. John, New Brunswick is Canada's largest refinery, processing over 300,000 barrels per day and accounting for 17% of the country's total refining capacity. There are no pipelines connecting it to the Western Canadian supply. Every barrel of crude arrives here by sea,